Welcome back to Michigan Matters, where we're talking with Senator Gary Peters about the election cycle that was and looking ahead. And the last election cycle, I think that the spend between the two campaigns to run for Senate was something in upwards of $70 million. Is that about right?
I think it's been the 60 million range, but at that point, it's all way too much money.
I know when John Dingell, a couple election cycles ago, told me that the biggest problem that he had with the job is that raising money to run again started virtually the next morning after he was, inaugurated in. And you were in a 6-year term, but the money chase, this is becoming a really expensive, far more expensive venture, isn't it?
Well, it has. It's out of control. I've always been a big proponent for campaign finance reform, and now that I've been through the Senate race, I'm passionate about campaign finance reform. But it's not just what the candidates have to raise. It's really this outside money that comes in. It parachutes in. It's millions of dollars, and they tend to be negative ads are what you get from the outside groups. And the problem when you have all that money being spent on negative ads, I think it also just turns people off to the process. And if people get cynical and don't want to be a part of the political process, our country is going to suffer. The democracy suffers.
We've been talking for decades now, it seems, about campaign finance reform. The conversation doesn't seem to go very far. Do you expect to see anything really change in that format?
It's hard because various folks benefit from that. But, I hope one thing we could do, at least when it comes to some of the outside money, is to pass the Disclose Act, which I support, which says at a minimum, let's make sure that people know who these groups are. All the groups have nice-sounding names, but you should have an idea who's actually investing, and then that kind of disclosure will help the public make determinations. When I see an ad from that group, I know who's behind it, and I may or may not agree with them, and that should be information that they have.
The other thing you're doing now in this new job, you are getting some committee assignments. Just real quickly, if you could just give us a headline on those assignments. And how do you get those assignments? Do you vie for them? Are you given them? What's the process quickly?
It's done through the leadership, and you make requests, but seniority plays in quite a bit with that. And obviously, I'm the new person on the block, so I have to build up seniority. You get some other committees, although I've got some great committees. I'm on Commerce, Science, and Transportation, which has regulatory authority over the economy broadly. Everything except banking and energy, but everything else. The auto industry, for example, is in the Commerce Committee, technology, all the transit. I'm also on Homeland Security. Homeland Security Committee, obviously, is a very high-profile committee given where we are right now.
Since we are involved with the Great Lakes here, one-fifth of the world's fresh water supply here is in Michigan surrounding us here, and you being involved in that, what kinds of things will you be doing in Washington and trying to protect ways here?
Well, right now I'm working on some pipeline safety legislation in regards to the Great Lakes. So pipeline safety is within my Commerce Committee assignment, and I'm very concerned about an oil pipeline that is in the Straits of Mackinac from the Upper Peninsula to Lower Peninsula, 5 miles across fresh water. And at Michigan, we've had the most expensive pipeline break in history in Kalamazoo just a few short years ago.
It was with Enbridge, of course, and it did major damage. So when you're in Washington now, what kinds of things will you be doing to help promote that?
Well, to put that legislation together, well, I've offered an amendment which we weren't able to get support on the Keystone Pipeline amendment, but I have the chairman of the committee wanting to work with me. In fact, I had a great conversation with our Republican chair about it, and he was willing to release his staff to work on this issue. So I'm very confident, because certainly a pipeline break in the Great Lakes would be catastrophic, and we've got to deal with it.
And as part of that same amendment, you also talk about the petroleum coke and studying the health impact of some of that, and what's the latest with that?
And we'll continue to move forward with that as well, and just have best practices. We're going to have more and more of this petroleum coke. We know what happened here in Detroit. We know how it was blown into people's homes and into businesses and into the lakes. That's unacceptable. They now have a problem with it in Chicago. We've got to find out what are those best practices and make sure that we're employing that to protect the health and safety of people in those areas.
As someone now representing the state of Michigan on a national level in the Senate, the thing like globalization and working on building economic bridges to the world sort of thing, how do you view your role in all of that?
Well, it's very important, and foreign policy actually figures in much more into the U.S. Senate, and so we'll be very engaged in foreign policy issues. It's why I was involved with the International Bridge in Canada, but it's also about building bridges to other countries around the world and making sure that we continue to be the most competitive economy, but have the relations necessary to really take advantage of that.
And I know that we're going to be talking in the next segment when Brooks and Marks join us, talking about the bridge itself, but how confident are you that this international crossing will be built?
I'm very confident. We had to get through, I guess we'll talk about it, but we got through the hurdle when it came to the Customs Plaza. We've got the resources to put into that. We have a commitment from the federal government to make sure they fully staff it. And so I'm confident we can move forward. And it is just so important for our state to continue to be the logistics center for not just the Midwest, but the country. And our position on the border between Chicago and Toronto and then to the port of Halifax means that we are positioned to take advantage of some incredible trade opportunities.
And we're going to continue the conversation and bring on the rest of the roundtable, but we're going to take a break and be back with more Michigan Matters right after this.